Hey, I wanted to go through the process um, and give a brief demo of a utility that I wrote to help my friend Bronwyn um, win a modeling, at least it's still going on, but win a modeling competition for Inked Girls. Um, what happens is they have people come here and click this vote button, um, and it updates the score over here. And at a certain point, they're going to cut off all the entries, and whoever's in first gets a trip to somewhere. I forget the entire details. Um, so what I did is I first inspect the source code, looking for possible vulnerabilities. And what I learned first is that JavaScript injection is possible. And the way I found that was to find out what form this is using JavaScript injection and the alert function. And the way to do that, one way to do that is to do something like this. You do a JavaScript alert document.forms at 0. This is the first form, and then we're looking for the ID because the ID of this form is vote_form. And so the first one gives us nothing. It's because there is no ID. It's this connect with Facebook, and we can verify that by doing the same alert, but instead of looking for the ID, we'll look for the name, and it is a login. So the second one is also a login, but this one has an ID of login. And the third one's register. The next one is this custom Google search box. And finally, when we get to the next one, we find our form. And so we will find vote form. So the way we can JavaScript inject is to create another kind of injection, but this one we're going to be specifically looking at getting the ID, which we know is document.forms at 4. This was another way that I tried. We're going to try to get the element by the ID, and we're just going to try to submit it afterwards. But this one doesn't work as the page doesn't refresh. Maybe there's an error in the syntax somewhere. I couldn't exactly tell you why. So the way that I ended up doing it was coming up with something like this. We do a document.forms at 4.submit. And this, as you can see, does refresh it. Well, this is still a little bit slow, especially considering it takes almost just as much time as refreshing it and pushing vote. So I looked at creating a program in C# which would automate this process for me. So what I would have to do is I would have to find a way to submit this hidden field called vote provided. So what I came up with was to create a virtual web client that had a spoofed header for a user agent. So it thinks it's Chrome or Mozilla or something like that, and then it simulates that this icon has been clicked. Well, that ended up working fairly well, but it still wasn't really any faster than having one person do it. It was just an automated process now instead of a manual one. So to increase the odds of her winning, I created multiple threads that did the exact same thing. And the thread software looks something like this. So here is the virtual client. This is where the form values are added. That's the vote form and the 4757 or whatever. and this is where we set the headers for the user agent. And so we just repeatedly try to upload the values to the URL with the name value collection, and I have this catch exception in here because there's a possibility that timeout errors will occur, and honestly, when this thing's running, I don't care if there's a timeout. The only thing that I'd be worried about is getting an IP ban, but it hasn't seemed to come. So what the end application ends up looking like is something like this. So I have the URL here. I have a track bar that allows you to select the number of threads you want to use. And here I have a results field. Right now, it only states that the application has been started with a certain number of threads and prints that threads when they're started. I was using that to ensure that all of the threads I created were being created, and then I added a stop functionality that stops all the threads and states that the application has been stopped. Aside from that, there's this About button, which just spawns a new frame that has some of the information, like who it was written by, when it was written, or at least this version, a little bit of background information on it, and a place to get more info. So without further ado though, let's see this in action. With 6 threads, we can start it, and as you can see, they're all started. Something I have noticed on their server, when 6 threads is used, I don't know if it's because their server is overwhelmed by the number of threads submitting, but it tends to increase drastically. So I can't really leave it on for too long, because as it is, they increase very rapidly. When I first did my tests on it, it was about 100 votes per minute, but it will continue to update the value even after if I've stopped it, so I'm not entirely sure if that's accurate. And as you can see, it does take a while for their server to process the requests for refreshes. If there are any questions, just go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, the next video will be a source review. Thanks.